All right, let's have a look at the drum set we used for this recording, as well as all the microphones, how we position them, and why. Let's go. The drum setup is very basic. We just put what is absolutely needed for this track, which means that there are no toms that are not played, no cymbals that are not played, which makes setting up microphones much easier, as if you would have to squeeze in microphones in between of 10,000 toms or cymbals. So what we are using is a 22-inch bass drum, 16-inch floor tom, 14-inch snare, 2 cymbals and a hi-hat, and that's about it. Let's go through the individual elements and see how they are tuned and what we did to them to let them sound the way they do. Alright, let's start with the overhead microphones. By selecting the kind of microphones you use and the placement you use, you define a little bit the overall aesthetics of your drum recording. In this case, we are going for a bright, cymbal-focused sound. So we have 2 small diaphragm condensers pointing directly at each crash to capture mostly the cymbals and as little general kit as possible. The bass drum is tuned as low as we could and recorded with 2 microphones. There is one dynamic microphone inside, which captures more of the attack and the mid-range of the kick. And then we have a do-it-yourself sub-kick kind of microphone, which is basically a speaker wired in a way that it works like a dynamic microphone, and it captures the oomph of the kick drum. Let's have a look at the snare and the microphones. We use a very basic steel snare, 14-inch, with a bottom head cranked up so that we get a good response from the wires, and the top head tuned pretty low to get a rather rich and fat sound. I have another video that I made about snare tuning if you want to have a look at it. Dampening wise, there is not a lot going on. We just have this little piece of fabric that is basically just controlling the sustain of the ring of the snare a tiny bit. When you hit the snare, it's lifting off a little bit, so we have the full sound, and as soon as the hit is over, it's lowering down again and just controlling the sustain. That works amazingly well. We have 2 microphones on the snare, one dynamic microphone on the bottom pointing directly at the wires of the snare to get this nice crisp sound. The top microphone is, as you can see, at a pretty shallow angle. This is in order to get a lot of high end out of the snare microphone, because the shallower the angle, the more high end. The more perpendicular, the more bottom end, but the less high end. And we wanted as little bleed of the hi-hat into the snare microphone. That's why if we already have a crisp sound from the microphone, we don't need to crank high end and risk of getting more hi-hat into the microphone than we already have. And to prevent bleed even a little more, we have this little separator made of very heavy material that is just blocking off the hi-hat from the snare microphone, and that's working pretty well as well. The tom we used is a 16-inch tom, tuned as low as we could, with quite a bit of dampening. There are some moon gels, there's some tape stuffed on the resonant head, and there is this piece of leather that bounces up when you hit the tom and lowers down as soon as the hit is over to dampen the tom after the hit has been passing through completely. The microphone used is a dynamic microphone at a pretty perpendicular angle to the skin to get a lot of bottom end. On the hi-hat we have a good old SM57 pointing downwards towards the head, a little bit away from the set because we just want the hi-hat and not a lot of snare or anything else, and we are focusing on the mid-range of the hi-hat just to pull the hi-hat a little bit closer towards us in the mix. In order to get a very natural drum sound, you need some kind of room microphone that is capturing the whole kit from distance. My favorite way of doing it is using this guy. I made a complete video about this microphone construct and how I built it. It's basically emulating a human head standing in the room listening to whatever you put in front of it. And it's giving us a nice 3-dimensional picture of the drums in this case. All right, 2 more microphones for this drum setup. one pair of ribbon microphones in the untreated lounge of the studio. We are outside the recording room. This is the door that we leave open so that some drum sound can spill out of the recording room into this untreated room. So basically, this is now our echo chamber where we can pick up some diffuse and ambient drum sound to make the whole drum kit sound a little bit larger than if we just had the more dry tracks of inside the recording room.